Justice isn't blind. It's coming.
The message notification lit up Jenna's phone at 11:47 p.m., and she didn't even flinch when I walked into our bedroom. She was lying there in her silk nightgown, the blue glow washing over her face as she typed something back with the kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. Not directed at me, anyway. "Who's texting this late?" I asked, settling onto my side of the bed. "Just Sarah," she said without looking up. "Girl drama." I knew it wasn't Sarah. Sarah lived in Phoenix now and wouldn't be up at nearly 3 a.m. her time. But I said nothing, just watched as Jenna's fingers moved across the screen with practiced ease. The phone buzzed again, another smile, this one wider. When she finally set the phone down on her nightstand, screen up, I waited, counted to 60. Her breathing deepened into sleep, but I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling fan's slow rotation in the darkness. At 1:15 a.m., another buzz. The screen lit up automatically. I could see it from where I lay. A photo notification. The sender's name, Dean Russo. My student from Safe Track Driving School. 24 years old, cocky kid with dreams of racing professionally. I'd been teaching him parallel parking and highway merging for 3 months. I slipped out of bed and padded around to Jenna's side. Her phone had no lock screen. She'd always said she had nothing to hide. I tapped the notification. The photo loaded and my world tilted. Jenna, in her car, wearing a red dress I'd never seen. She was looking over her shoulder, laughing. The angle suggested the photographer was in the back seat, or maybe the driver's seat while she posed. The timestamp showed yesterday, 6:30 p.m. I'd been at the school until 7, teaching Mrs. Henderson how to navigate construction zones. I scrolled up. More photos. Jenna at some restaurant I didn't recognize. Jenna in what looked like a hotel room. Jenna in Dean's arms outside a bar called the Mile Marker. My hands started shaking. I scrolled further. Text messages going back weeks. "Can't wait to see you tonight," from Dean. "Greg's working late again. Perfect timing," from Jenna. "You make me feel alive again," from Jenna. "Leave him. We could be amazing together," from Dean. I set the phone down carefully, my training kicking in. In the Army, when everything went to hell, you got quiet. You observed. You planned. You didn't react until you had all the intelligence. I went to my home office and opened my laptop. Found Dean's file from the driving school. Address, 47 Maple Street, apartment 3B. I knew the building knew construction, the kind of place young guys with good jobs rented to impress girls. The next evening, I told Jenna I was grabbing dinner with Bill from work. Instead, I drove to the Mile Marker. It was a dive bar on the edge of town, the kind of place you went when you didn't want to be seen by anyone who mattered. I parked across the street and waited. At 8:30, Jenna's silver Honda pulled into the lot. She got out wearing jeans and a black top that hugged her in ways I remembered from when we were dating. Dean emerged from his red Mustang, all swagger and confidence. He walked over to her and she melted into his arms like she was coming home. They kissed for a long time. Her hands were in his hair. His were on her waist, and I watched my 17-year marriage dissolve in real time. I started my truck and drove home. Deleted 3 contacts from Jenna's phone while she showered. Her sister Lisa, her friend Michelle, and her boss Karen. Then I sat in my recliner and waited for her to come to bed. "How was dinner with Bill?" she asked, sliding under the covers. "Same as always," I said. "How was Sarah?" "Oh, you know, same drama, different day." I closed my eyes and began planning. 2 weeks later, everything changed in ways I never could have planned. Emily had been excited about the movie night with Monica and their friends. Some horror flick they'd been wanting to see for months. At 17, she was fearless about everything except disappointing me, and she'd asked to borrow Jenna's car because her own was in the shop getting new brakes. "Sure, honey," Jenna had said, barely looking up from her phone. "Keys are on the counter." I was working late at Safe Track, helping a nervous 16-year-old named Tyler master 3-point turns in the parking lot. His mother waited in the office, drinking coffee and checking her watch every few minutes. At 9:15, my phone rang. Jenna. "Greg, oh God, Greg, there's been an accident." The words hit like physical blows. "What kind of accident? Where's Emily?" "I don't know. The police called. They said someone was hurt. We need to get to Presbyterian Hospital right now." I left Tyler with the office manager and drove faster than I'd ever driven in my life. Found Jenna in the emergency room parking lot, pacing beside her car. Her face was streaked with mascara, her hands shaking as she tried to light a cigarette. "What happened?" I demanded. "I don't know. They wouldn't tell me over the phone. Just said there was an accident involving my car and we needed to come immediately." We ran inside together. The nurse at the desk looked up with the kind of expression that prepared you for bad news. "Mr. and Mrs. Tolan?" "Please come with me." The walk down that hallway lasted forever. I could hear Jenna's breathing, sharp and panicked. My own heartbeat was so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. "Doctor." Martinez was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes that had delivered too much bad news. "Please sit down. Just tell us," I said. "Your daughter was involved in a collision with a semi-truck on Route 15. She was pronounced dead at the scene." "I'm very sorry." The world went silent. Not quiet, silent, like someone had turned off all the sound in the universe. I could see Jenna's mouth moving, could see the doctor's lips forming words, but I heard nothing. Then the sound crashed back in all at once. Jenna screaming. The doctor's voice explaining impact and instantaneous passing. My own voice asking questions that didn't matter anymore. "The other passengers?" I managed. "Monica Stevens was critically injured but stable. She's in surgery now. The other 2 passengers had minor injuries and have been treated and released." Monica, Emily's best friend since middle school. They'd been inseparable, 2 girls against the world, planning college together and dreaming about their futures. "We need to identify," the doctor began. "I'll do it," I said. Jenna couldn't stop sobbing, couldn't even stand up. So I followed a different nurse down another endless hallway to a room I never wanted to see. Emily looked peaceful. That's what everyone says, and it was true. Her face was unmarked, her dark hair spread across the pillow like she was just sleeping. The damage had been to her body, hidden under the sheet. "That's my daughter," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "That's Emily Rose Tolan." I signed papers, answered questions, made phone calls to family members who would drive through the night to be with us. Through it all, I felt like I was watching someone else's life, someone else's tragedy. It wasn't until we got home that I thought to ask the question that would haunt me forever. "Where were you tonight?" I asked Jenna, as we sat in our dark living room. She looked up from her tissues, eyes red and swollen. "What? When Emily was trying to reach you, where were you?" I was at Michelle's. We were having wine and lost track of time. I had my phone on silent." I stared at her. Michelle, whose number I deleted from her phone 2 weeks ago. "What did the police say about the accident?" "Semi ran a red light. Emily couldn't stop in time. The trucker was texting, they think." Her voice broke again. "She tried calling me 17 times, Greg." 17 times, and I didn't answer. I went to Emily's room and found her phone on the charger, scrolled through her final calls. 4 attempts to reach Jenna between 8:30 and 9 p.m., right around the time the movie would have started. Then calls to me, but I'd been in the car with Tyler, my phone in my office. The last call Emily made was to 911 at 9:03 p.m. I sat on her bed, surrounded by all the things that made her Emily. Her books stacked on the nightstand. Her easel in the corner with a half-finished painting of a sunset. Her diploma from the driving course I'd taught her, hanging in a frame beside her mirror. She'd been such a careful driver. Never speeding, always signaling, constantly checking her mirrors, just like I'd taught her. The bracelet I'd given her for her 16th birthday was missing from her jewelry box. She never drove anywhere without it, said it was her good luck charm. At the funeral 3 days later, I stood beside the casket and watched Jenna lean into Dean's shoulder for support. He'd shown up in a black suit, playing the part of family friend, his hand protectively on her back. Nobody else seemed to notice. They were all focused on Emily, on grief, on the impossible task of saying goodbye to someone who'd had her whole life ahead of her. But I noticed everything. The way Dean whispered something in Jenna's ear that made her nod. The way she gripped his hand during the eulogy. The way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. My daughter was dead, and my wife was being comforted by her lover. I started planning that night. Monica Stevens came home from the hospital on a Tuesday. I waited until Thursday to visit her. The Stevens family lived in a ranch house 10 minutes from ours, with a wraparound porch and the kind of garden that required daily attention. Monica's mother, Carol, answered the door with the hollow-eyed look I recognized in my own mirror. "Greg," she said, her voice heavy with shared grief. "Come in. Monica's been asking about you." I found Monica in the living room, her left leg elevated in a cast, her arm still in a sling. She looked so much younger than 18, pale and fragile against the couch cushions. Mr. Tolan, she said, trying to sit up straighter. Don't move, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Better. Physically. She paused, her eyes filling. I keep thinking about that night. About what I should have done differently. I sat in the chair across from her. Tell me about that night, Monica. If you can. She nodded, wiping her eyes with her good hand. We were supposed to meet at the theater at 8. Emily picked me up around 7:30. She seemed nervous about something. Nervous how? She kept checking her phone, said she was trying to reach your wife about something important, but Mrs. Tolan wasn't answering. Emily was worried because she'd promised to be home by 11, and the movie was running later than we thought. I leaned forward. What time did she start trying to call Jenna? Around 8:15, I think. We were in the theater lobby. Emily said she felt bad taking the car without checking in first. She tried calling 4 or 5 times before we went into the movie. And after the movie? Monica's voice dropped to a whisper. Emily was really upset by then. She said, Mrs. Tolan always answered her phone that something must be wrong. She wanted to drive straight home to check, but I convinced her to try calling one more time. I felt something cold settling in my chest. What happened then? She pulled over at that gas station on Route 15 and tried the calling again. When there was still no answer, she got really scared. She was crying, saying what if something had happened to Mrs. Tolan? What if there was an emergency? Monica's voice broke. I should have told her to just go home. Instead, I said we should call you. But my phone was in my office. We didn't know that. Emily tried calling you twice, then gave up and decided to drive home. She was going to surprise Mrs. Tolan by making her favorite tea and waiting up to make sure she was okay. Monica was sobbing now. She was worried about her, Mr. Tolan. Right up until the truck hit you. I don't remember the impact. Just Emily saying Mom's not answering, and then waking up in the hospital. I stayed with Monica for another hour, listening to her memories of Emily, her guilt over surviving when her best friend didn't. When I finally left, I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, staring at the Stevens house. Emily had died worried about Jenna. Had spent her final conscious moments trying to reach the woman who was supposed to love her most, who was instead in some bar or hotel room with a 24-year-old punk. When I got home, Jenna was in the kitchen making dinner. She'd been trying to maintain normal routines since the funeral, as if cooking and cleaning could somehow bring our life back. How's Monica? She asked, without looking up from the stove. Recovering. She told me Emily spent that whole night trying to reach you. Jenna's shoulders tensed. I told you I was at Michelle's. I had my phone on silent because we were talking about her divorce. Michelle moved to Denver 3 months ago, Jenna. The wooden spoon clattered against the pot. Jenna turned around slowly, her face pale. What? Michelle Rodriguez. Your friend Michelle. She moved to Denver in March for that job opportunity, remember? We sent a card to her new address. Jenna stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without sound. So where were you that night? I asked. Where were you while our daughter was dying, trying to reach you? I meant Sarah. I was with Sarah. Sarah lives in Phoenix. Try again. Jenna's face crumpled. Greg, were you with Dean? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. Jenna's expression went through several changes: shock, denial, anger, and finally something that looked like relief. Were you with Dean Russo while Emily was trying to call you? She sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Yes. Where? At the mile marker. We were talking and I turned off my phone because... She stopped, realizing how it sounded. Because you didn't want to be interrupted while you were with your lover. It's not what you think. What I think is that our daughter died trying to reach her mother, who was too busy screwing around with some kid to answer her phone. Jenna flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't you dare blame Emily's end on me. That trucker ran the red light. That's what eliminated her. You're right, I said calmly. But she wouldn't have been on that road if she hadn't been worried sick about you. She would have gone straight home instead of stopping to call. She would have been 15 minutes ahead of that truck. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving Jenna crying at the table. That night, I set up a workspace in the basement, cleared off my old workbench and organized my tools. spread out a map of the town and marked locations. Safe Track Driving School, the mile marker, Dean's apartment, Jenna's office. I pinned up photos of Emily and started a timeline on the wall. Everything I knew about Jenna and Dean's relationship, their meeting places, their schedules. For the first time since the funeral, I felt purpose returning. I had work to do. The first move was surgical and untraceable. Dean drove a red 2019 Mustang that he kept immaculate, washing it twice a week and parking it away from other cars to avoid door dings. He was proud of that car, posted photos of it on social media, called it his baby. On a Tuesday night, I waited until 2 a.m. and walked the 4 blocks to his apartment complex. Used a small knife to puncture 3 of his tires, not slash them, which would look intentional, but create slow leaks that would cause gradual deflation over several hours. Dean discovered the problem the next morning when he came out for work. I watched from my truck as he stood there, hands on his hips, staring at his flattened tires. He called someone, probably AAA, and paced around the car while he waited. The beauty of it was the doubt. Nails from construction, faulty valve stems, vandalism. There were a dozen possible explanations. Nothing that pointed directly to sabotage. While Dean dealt with his tire problems, I drove to Jenna's office building. She worked as a coordinator for a medical billing company, arriving every morning at 8:30 and parking in the same spot in the covered garage. I'd been thinking about her car alarm. A simple device, really, designed to be triggered by impact or attempted entry, but also sensitive to vibration and electrical interference, the kind of thing that might malfunction if someone knew which wires to cross. I waited until lunch hour, when the garage was mostly empty. It took me less than 5 minutes to access the alarm system under her hood and make the necessary adjustments. Nothing permanent, nothing that would damage the car. Just a small modification that would cause the alarm to sound randomly over the next several days. That night, Jenna's car alarm went off at 3:17 a.m. She jolted awake beside me, confused and disoriented. "What the hell?" she mumbled, reaching for her robe. "Car alarm," I said, already getting dressed. "I'll go check." Outside, I made a show of walking around her Honda, looking for signs of attempted break-in or damage. Found nothing, of course. Reset the alarm and came back inside. "Everything look okay?" Jenna asked. "Must have been a cat or something. You know how sensitive those things are?" The alarm went off again the next night at 2:45 a.m., and the night after that at 1:30 a.m. By the 4th night, Jenna was exhausted and irritated, and I was the concerned husband suggesting she take it to the dealer for service. "It's probably just a malfunction," I told her over breakfast. These electronic systems can be finicky. While Jenna dealt with her car troubles, I turned my attention to Dean's professional life. Safe Track Driving School maintained files on all students, including their DMV records and scheduled road tests. Dean was supposed to take his advanced driving exam the following Tuesday, the final step before getting certified as a driving instructor himself. I made an anonymous call to the DMV office, claiming to be a concerned citizen who'd witnessed reckless driving by someone with Dean's license plate number. Provided just enough details to sound credible: speeding through a school zone, running a stop sign, erratic lane changes. The call triggered an automatic review of Dean's driving record and temporarily suspended his testing privileges pending investigation. His road test was postponed indefinitely. Dean was furious when he found out. Called the school demanding answers, accused someone of filing a false report, but there was nothing he could do except wait for the bureaucracy to sort itself out. I listened to his angry phone call from my office, watched him pace around the parking lot afterward, kicking at loose gravel and swearing at his phone. The next morning, I left a small gift on Jenna's windshield. A photo of Emily from her last birthday, smiling as she blew out the candles on her cake. I placed it under the wiper blade where Jenna would be sure to see it, but where it might have been left by anyone. Jenna found it when she came out for lunch. I watched from across the street as she picked up the photo, her hands shaking. She looked around the parking garage, searching for whoever might have left it, but I was well hidden. That evening, she mentioned it to me casually, as if it weren't important. "Someone left a photo of Emily on my car today." "What kind of photo?" "From her birthday last year. Just stuck under the windshield wiper." I frowned, playing concerned husband. "That's strange. Maybe one of her friends left it, or a teacher from school?" "Maybe." But Jenna didn't sound convinced. The psychological pressure was building exactly as I'd planned. Small incidents that could be coincidental, but felt threatening. disruptions to their routines that created stress and paranoia without providing a clear target for their anger. 2 weeks into my campaign, I made my final move in this phase. Jenna's car was parked in our garage overnight, and I had easy access to work on it. Using jumper cables and some basic electrical knowledge from my Army days, I wired the garage door opener to the car's battery in a way that would cause the door to malfunction if anyone tried to open it while the car was running. It was tricky work, requiring precise connections, but I'd always been good with electronics. The next morning, Jenna started her car as usual, but couldn't get the garage door to open. She tried the remote, then the wall button, then called for me to help. "Must be a power issue," I said, examining the opener with fake puzzlement. "Let me check the connections." I made a show of poking around the mechanism, eventually discovering the jury-rigged wiring. "Jesus, Jenna, look at this." She came over to see what I'd found. The jumper cables were obviously placed, clearly not part of the original installation. "Someone wired your car to the garage door," I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "If you tried to drive out with the door closed..." I didn't need to finish the sentence. We both understood the implication. Jenna stared at the makeshift electrical connection, her face pale. "Who would do something like this?" "I don't know, but I'm calling the police." Detective Farley was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town cop nearing retirement. 50-something gray mustache, the kind of patient demeanor that came from 25 years of handling domestic disputes and petty vandalism. He examined the garage door wiring with professional thoroughness, took photos, and asked all the right questions. "Any idea who might want to scare you folks?" he asked, settling into our living room with a notebook. Jenna sat beside me on the couch, close enough to seem like a united front, but not quite touching. "We can't think of anyone," she said. "No recent conflicts, workplace issues, neighbors?" I shook my head. "We keep to ourselves, mostly. Especially since our daughter passed away last month." Farley's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. Car accident, wasn't it?" "Emily was 17, Jenna said, her voice catching. "She was our only child." "That's rough." "Something like that can bring out strange behavior in people. Grief affects everyone differently." He made a note. "Any chance this could be related to the accident? Someone who knew Emily?" It was a reasonable question, and I'd prepared for it. "Maybe, but I can't imagine who would want to hurt us. Emily was well-liked at school." Farley spent another hour documenting everything, dusting for fingerprints that wouldn't exist, and advising us about security precautions. Standard procedure for what looked like escalating maltreatment. After he left, Jenna poured herself a large glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window. "This is getting scary, Greg." "I know. We should consider staying somewhere else for a few days. Maybe at Dean's place?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. I turned slowly to face her. "Dean's place?" Her face flushed red. I was thinking out loud. "He has that secure apartment building." "Right, your friend Dean." We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I could see her calculating what I knew, what I suspected, how much she could safely admit. "Greg, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "Dean and we've been spending time together since Emily died. He's been helping me cope, helping you cope. It's not what you think. We're just friends. He lost his father young, so he understands grief." Every word was a lie, but I nodded sympathetically. "That's good. It's important to have support." Relief flooded her face. "So you don't mind?" "Why would I mind you having a friend?" That night, I activated the next phase of my plan. For weeks, I'd been documenting Dean's driving habits, following him at a distance, learning his routes and timing. He was predictable in the way young men often are. Same coffee shop every morning, same gym 3 evenings a week, same bar on Friday nights. Dean also had a bad habit of texting while driving. I'd observed him doing it multiple times, always careful to check for police before pulling out his phone. But I'd also installed a small dash cam in my truck and managed to capture him in the act several times. The footage wasn't perfect, taken from a distance, sometimes obscured by other traffic, but with some editing, it could be made to look more dramatic. I spent hours on my computer, enhancing certain frames, adjusting the timing, creating a narrative of reckless driving that would be believable to anyone who didn't know the context. The anonymous tip I sent to the DMV included a flash drive with the edited footage and a typed letter explaining my concerns as a fellow citizen. I described Dean as a menace to public safety, someone who regularly endangered other drivers with his reckless behavior. Within days, Dean received a notice that his license was under review. His advanced driving test was postponed again, this time indefinitely. When he called SafeTrack to complain, I was there to take the call. "This is insane," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "Someone's obviously targeting me." "Have you been driving safely?" I asked. "Following all traffic laws?" "Of course I have. This is some kind of setup." "Set up by who?" "I don't know. But someone has it out for me." I made sympathetic noises and promised to look into it, knowing there was nothing he could do. The bureaucracy would grind on for weeks while his life fell apart piece by piece. Meanwhile, Jenna was having her own problems at work. I'd been studying her company's organizational structure, identifying key personnel and potential vulnerabilities. Her boss, Karen Mitchell, was a stickler for procedure and had fired people for minor infractions. Using information I'd gathered from Jenna's conversations and social media posts, I created a series of fake receipts and documents suggesting financial irregularities in her department. Nothing too dramatic, just discrepancies that would trigger an internal investigation. I mailed the documents anonymously to Karen Mitchell's office with a note expressing concerns about possible fraud in Jenna's section. The handwriting was disguised, the postmark from a neighboring town. Jenna came home the following Tuesday looking shaken. "They're investigating my department," she told me over dinner. "Someone sent anonymous tips about financial irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "Falsified receipts, improper billing codes. They're auditing everything from the past 6 months." I frowned with appropriate concern. "Do you have anything to worry about?" "No, of course not. But you know how these things go. Even if they find nothing, it makes everyone look bad." The stress was showing on her face, in the way she held her shoulders, in the new lines around her eyes. Between the car problems, the garage incident, and now work troubles, Jenna was stretched thin. Dean was faring even worse. His motorcycle, a sleek Yamaha he used for weekend rides, had been his pride and joy since college. I'd observed his maintenance routine, noticed that he did most of his own work in the parking area behind his apartment building. Brake systems on motorcycles are simpler than cars, but more dangerous to tamper with. A small adjustment to the brake line, barely visible to casual inspection, could cause catastrophic failure at highway speeds. I waited until a Sunday evening when Dean typically worked on his bike, watched from a distance as he cleaned and adjusted various components, then left the motorcycle in its usual parking spot. After midnight, I made my visit. The brake line adjustment took less than 10 minutes. A tiny puncture, sealed with a substance that would dissolve under heat and pressure. The brakes would work fine for normal riding, but fail completely during hard braking. Dean discovered the problem Wednesday evening during his ride home from the gym. According to the police report, he was traveling about 40 miles per hour when another driver ran a stop sign. Dean hit the brakes, and nothing happened. He laid the bike down in a controlled crash, skidding across the asphalt and into a guardrail, broke his left wrist, sustained road rash across his back and legs, but avoided serious injury through skill and luck. I visited him in the hospital the next day, playing the concerned instructor checking on a former student. "Hell of a thing," I said, standing beside his bed. "You're lucky to be alive." "Someone sabotaged my bike," Dean said, his voice hoarse from pain medication. "The brake line was cut." "Cut? Are you sure?" "I know what I saw. Someone wants me dead." I shook my head sympathetically. "That's a serious accusation. Have you told the police?" "They think I'm paranoid. Said it could have been road debris or normal wear." "Well, motorcycle maintenance is tricky. Even experienced riders make mistakes." Dean stared at me with new intensity. "I didn't make any mistakes. Of course not. I'm just saying accidents happen." After I left the hospital, I drove to the mile marker and sat in the parking lot thinking. The psychological pressure was working exactly as planned. Dean was paranoid and injured, Jenna was stressed and frightened, and their relationship was showing cracks under the strain. But I wasn't done yet. The real work was just beginning. Dean came home from the hospital with his left arm in a cast and enough paranoia to power a small city. Jenna visited him twice in the first week, bringing groceries and playing nurse, but I could see the strain wearing on both of them. "He thinks someone's trying to eliminate him," she told me after her second visit. "Says his bike was sabotaged." "That's pretty extreme. What do the police think?" "They're treating it as an accident. No evidence of tampering." She paused, swirling her wine. But with everything else that's been happening, you think it's connected? I don't know what to think anymore. I reached across the table and took her hand, playing the supportive husband. Maybe we should go away for a while. Take a vacation, get some distance from all this craziness. I can't leave now. Dean needs help, and work is... Right, Dean needs help. She caught the edge in my voice and pulled her hand away. He's been a good friend to me, Greg. During a very difficult time. I'm sure he has. We stared at each other across the dinner table, years of marriage and recent betrayal creating a tension thick enough to cut. Jenna looked away first. That weekend, I made a trip to the electronics store in the next town over, paid cash for a small wireless microphone and receiver, the kind used for presentations or amateur recording. Nothing sophisticated, but enough to pick up conversations in a small room. Monday evening, while Jenna was at the grocery store, I drove to Dean's apartment. The building had security cameras in the lobby, but none in the stairwells or hallways. I climbed to the third floor and found apartment 3B. Dean's lock was standard residential grade, easily bypassed with the right tools. I'd learned lockpicking in the Army, a skill I'd never expected to use in civilian life. The apartment was dark, and Dean's Mustang wasn't in the parking lot. I found what I was looking for in the living room, a table lamp beside the couch where they would naturally sit together. The microphone fit easily inside the base, hidden among the existing wiring. The transmitter was small enough to tape under the end table. The whole operation took less than 15 minutes. I was back in my truck before Dean returned from wherever he'd gone. That night, I tested the system from my basement workshop. Crystal clear audio from Dean's living room, transmitted to a receiver I kept locked in an old toolbox. I could hear his television, his phone conversations, even the sound of his refrigerator humming. Wednesday evening, Jenna told me she was going to check on Dean again. His cast is making it hard for him to cook, she explained. I thought I'd bring him dinner. That's thoughtful of you. I waited until she'd been gone for 30 minutes, then activated my receiver. Feel like I'm going crazy, Dean was saying. First the tires, then the DMV thing, now the bike. Someone's definitely targeting me. But who? Jenna's voice was clear through the hidden microphone. You don't have any enemies? What about your husband? A long pause. Greg? No, that's impossible. He doesn't even know about us. Are you sure? The way he looks at me sometimes, he looks at everyone that way. Greg's always been suspicious. Maybe it's time to tell him the truth. About us. Another pause, longer this time. I can't, not yet. With Emily gone and all the stress, it would destroy him. It's destroying me, Jenna. This sneaking around, lying to everyone. I want us to be together for real. We will be. Just give it some time. How much time? Another month? Another year? Don't pressure me, Dean. Please. I heard movement, probably them shifting on the couch. When Jenna spoke again, her voice was softer, more intimate. I love you. You know that, right? Then prove it. Leave him. It's not that simple. There's the house, our finances, Emily's estate. Excuses. They're not excuses, they're reality. Divorce is complicated, especially when someone dies. What if he left instead? What do you mean? I mean, what if Greg wasn't in the picture anymore? What if something happened to him? The silence that followed lasted so long I thought the connection had failed. Finally, Jenna spoke, her voice barely audible. Don't talk like that. I'm just saying accidents happen. Look at what's been happening to me lately. Dean, stop. He's unstable, Jenna. All that military training, his obsession with Emily's passing. What if he snaps? He won't snap. Greg's not violent. Everyone's violent under the right circumstances. I turned off the receiver and sat in the darkness of my basement processing what I'd heard. They weren't just having an affair anymore. They were discussing my removal from the equation. The next morning, I called in sick to SafeTrack and spent the day planning. If Dean wanted to play dangerous games, I would teach him what real danger looked like. Thursday night, Jenna went to visit Dean again. This time, I was ready. Can't keep living like this, Dean was saying when I tuned in. The paranoia is eating me alive. Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist or something. I don't need a therapist. I need this maltreatment to stop. What if we went to the police together? Told them everything. About what? That your husband might be stalking me? They'll want to know why. And then we'd have to explain about us. So we explain. And then what? Greg finds out, files for divorce, takes half your stuff, and I'm still getting maltreated by some psycho. We don't know it's Greg. Who else would it be? I don't have any other enemies. Maybe it's random. Someone who doesn't like young drivers or... Come on, Jenna, wake up. Your husband knows about us and he's trying to drive me away. Or worse. What do you mean, worse? I mean, maybe he's planning something more permanent. Another long silence. When Jenna spoke again, her voice had changed, become harder somehow. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we need to protect ourselves. How? By taking control of the situation before he does. Dean, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because if Greg is capable of sabotaging my bike, what else might he do? I heard ice clinking in glasses, the sound of drinks being poured. What did you have in mind? Jenna asked. An accident. Something that looks natural. You want to eliminate my husband? I want to eliminate a threat. There's a difference. Jesus Christ, Dean. Listen to yourself. I am listening. And what I hear is a man who's been pushed too far by someone who wants to destroy my life. So you want to destroy his? I want to survive. And I want us to be together without looking over our shoulders every day. The conversation continued for another hour, but I'd heard enough. They were planning to homicide me, just as I'd been planning to homicide them. The difference was that I had months of preparation and military training on my side. They had desperation and stupidity. Friday morning, I went to SafeTrack early and used the office computer to research car accidents in the area. I needed to understand their methods, anticipate their approach. Most staged accidents involved brake failure or steering problems, made to look like mechanical failure or driver error. I also started shopping for a new vehicle. Something older, less traceable that I could modify for my own purposes. The kind of car that might be used for a final confrontation. That evening, Detective Farley stopped by the house unexpectedly. Just wanted to follow up on that garage door incident, he said, settling into our living room with the same patient demeanor as before. Any leads? I asked. Nothing concrete. But I've been thinking about your situation, and something doesn't add up. Jenna tensed beside me on the couch. What do you mean? Well, you've had a series of incidents. The car alarm, the garage door, some maltreatment at work. But they're all relatively minor, like someone's trying to scare you rather than actually hurt you. Maybe they're building up to something, I suggested. Maybe. Or maybe they're trying to drive a wedge between you folks. Create tension in your marriage. Why would someone want to do that? Jenna asked. Farley shrugged. Could be someone who knows one of you personally. Someone with a grudge or an agenda. He asked a few more questions, but I could tell he was fishing. Looking for reactions, studying our body language, trying to read the dynamic between Jenna and me. After he left, Jenna poured herself another large glass of wine. He suspects something, she said. About what? About us. About the problems in our marriage. Are there problems in our marriage? She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, guilt, calculation, all mixed together in a way that made her look like a stranger. Greg, we need to talk. I'm listening. I know you know about Dean. What about Dean? Don't play games. I know you've figured it out. I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. Figured what out? That we're having an affair. The words hung in the air between us like a confession at a homicide trial. Jenna's hands were shaking as she held her wine glass. How long? I asked. Since March, before Emily died. Yes. Were you with him the night she died? Jenna closed her eyes. Yes. And you turned off your phone so you wouldn't be interrupted. Yes. While our daughter was trying to reach you. I didn't know she needed me. But you chose him over her. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Jenna set down her glass and faced me directly. It was like being alive again. For the first time in years, I felt like someone actually wanted me. I wanted you. No, you tolerated me. There's a difference. We stared at each other across 20 years of marriage, and I realized that everything I'd thought I knew about my wife had been an illusion. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. Dean thinks. Dean thinks what? Dean thinks you're dangerous, that you might hurt him. Am I dangerous, Jenna? She studied my face for a long moment. I don't know anymore. That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe beside me, knowing it would probably be one of the last times. Everything was accelerating now, moving toward a conclusion that only one of us had planned. I got up quietly and went to my basement workshop. Time to activate the final phase. The beauty of a good surveillance system is that the targets never know they're being watched until it's too late. For 3 weeks, I listened to Dean and Jenna plan my homicide with the methodical patience I'd learned in the Army. Their method was surprisingly sophisticated for amateurs. They'd decided on a car accident, staged to look like I'd fallen asleep at the wheel and crashed into a tree. Simple, believable, and difficult to investigate. "We need to pick the right location," Dean said during one of their planning sessions. "Somewhere isolated but not suspicious, a road Greg would normally take." "Route 26, Jenna suggested. "He uses it as a shortcut to safe track sometimes. It's mostly empty after dark." "Perfect. Lots of trees, sharp curves. Easy to make it look like he lost control." They discussed timing, alibis, and cleanup procedures with the casual efficiency of people planning a weekend camping trip. Jenna would establish her presence at home by ordering takeout delivery and leaving the TV on. Dean would disable my brakes while I was at work, then follow me at a distance until I reached the eliminate zone. "What about the investigation?" Jenna asked during their Tuesday night meeting. "What investigation?" "Tired widower falls asleep driving, crashes into tree, dies instantly." "Happens all the time. But what if they find evidence of tampering?" "They won't. Brake fluid leaks look like maintenance failures. Besides, who's going to push for an autopsy?" "You'll be the grieving widow, eager to put the tragedy behind you." I had to admire their thoroughness, even as I planned their destruction. The car I'd chosen for my own purposes was a 1987 Dodge Charger, purchased cash from a junkyard in the next county. Black paint faded to primer gray, engine that ran rough but reliable, interior that smelled like cigarettes and desperation. Perfect for what I had in mind. I spent weeks modifying it in a rented garage outside town, cut the brake lines in a way that would cause catastrophic failure after 20 minutes of driving. Installed a device that would lock the doors once the engine was running. Rigged the fuel system to create a spectacular fire on command. The key was making everything look like an accident, while ensuring there would be no survivors to contradict the story. Wednesday evening, Detective Farley made another unexpected visit. "Sorry to bother you folks again," he said, but his expression suggested otherwise. "I wanted to ask about your friend, Dean Russo." Jenna went rigid beside me. "What about him?" "He filed a complaint yesterday. Claims someone's been sabotaging his vehicle, maltreating him at work, generally making his life miserable." "That's terrible," I said. "Any idea who might be doing it?" "That's what I wanted to ask you. Dean seems to think it might be connected to the incidents at your house." "How would that be connected?" Jenna asked. Farley pulled out his notebook, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as his way of applying pressure. "Well, Dean mentioned that he's been spending time with you, Mrs. Tolan, helping you cope with your daughter's passing." "He's been very supportive," Jenna said carefully. "Right. And Dean seems to think that maybe your husband doesn't approve of the friendship." I looked appropriately confused. Why wouldn't I approve? Jenna needs all the support she can get right now. That's what I told him. "But young men sometimes get paranoid ideas, especially when they're under stress." Farley asked a few more questions, probing the boundaries of our relationship with Dean, testing our reactions to different scenarios. But he was fishing without bait, looking for something he couldn't quite define. After he left, Jenna confronted me directly. "Are you behind what's happening to Dean?" "What's happening to Dean?" "The tire slashing, the brake tampering, all of it." I met her gaze steadily. "Do you think I'm capable of something like that?" "I think you're capable of anything when you're angry." "Am I angry, Jenna? Aren't you?" "I'm disappointed." "There's a difference." She studied my face, looking for tells, for signs of deception or rage. But I'd had months to practice this expression, this calm mask that revealed nothing. "Dean thinks you're planning to hurt him," she said. "What do you think?" "I think you're planning something. I just don't know what." That night, I made my final preparations. Cleaned out my workshop, destroyed all evidence of surveillance equipment, and loaded the modified Charger with everything I'd need for the confrontation. I also wrote a letter to be found after everything was over. If you're reading this, then Dean Russo and my wife Jenna eliminated me tonight on Route 26. They've been planning my homicide for weeks, staging it to look like an accident. "Check Dean's apartment for evidence," Check Jenna's phone records. They eliminated me because I discovered their affair, and they were afraid of losing money in a divorce. I love my daughter Emily more than life itself. She died trying to reach her mother, who was too busy with her lover to answer the phone. Everything that follows is justice for Emily. Greg Tolan. I sealed the letter in an envelope and left it hidden in my office desk to be discovered during the inevitable search. Thursday afternoon, I called Dean and asked him to stay after hours at Safe Track. I want to discuss your situation, I told him. The maltreatment, the investigation, maybe I can help. He agreed, probably thinking it was an opportunity to assess the threat I represented. We met in the empty parking lot at 6:30, just as the sun was setting behind the tree line. Thanks for meeting with me, Dean said, his right arm still in a cast from the motorcycle accident. No problem. I've been thinking about what you said, about someone targeting you. And I think you're right. Someone is definitely out to get you. Dean nodded, vindicated. Do you have any idea who? Actually, I do. I smiled and pulled the remote trigger from my pocket. Dean's Mustang, parked 50 feet away, exploded in a ball of flame that lit up the evening sky. Dean stumbled backward, his face reflecting the orange glow of burning gasoline. What the hell? That's for Emily, I said calmly. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm also prepared. I showed him the tool I'd kept hidden under my jacket. Get in my truck, Dean. We're going for a drive. Dean climbed into my truck with the resigned cooperation of someone who'd finally realized how far out of his depth he was. The burning Mustang behind us lit up the Safe Track parking lot like a funeral pyre, and I could already hear sirens in the distance. Where are we going? He asked, his voice tight with fear. Route 26. Where you and Jenna plan to eliminate me? I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Brake failure, tree impact, grieving widow. Very clean, very believable. Dean stared at me as we drove through town toward the rural highways. You've been listening to us. For weeks. Amazing what people will say when they think they're alone. This is insane, Greg. Whatever you think you heard. I heard you planning my homicide. I heard Jenna agree to it. I heard you discuss alibis and cleanup procedures. We were just talking, blowing off steam. Were you blowing off steam when you sabotaged my garage door? When you cut my brake lines? Dean's confusion was genuine. I never touched your garage. Or your brakes. Right, that was all me. Creating the perfect setup for your grand finale. We'd reached the edge of town now, heading into the wooded hills where Route 26 wound through miles of empty countryside. Dean was calculating his chances, looking for opportunities to escape or overpower me. Don't even think about it, I said, showing him the tool again. I've been planning this for months. Every contingency, every possibility. What do you want? Justice for Emily. Emily died in an accident. Emily died because your girlfriend was too busy screwing you to answer her phone. Emily died scared and alone, trying to reach the mother who chose her lover over her own daughter. Dean was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. Finally, so you eliminate us both? That brings Emily back? No. But it makes things right. I turned onto Route 26, a narrow two-lane road that meandered through dense forest for 12 miles before connecting to the interstate. During the day, it carried moderate traffic from commuters looking to avoid the main highways. At night, it was virtually empty. There's something you should know, Dean said as we drove deeper into the woods. What's that? Jenna doesn't love you anymore, hasn't for years. She told me you've been like strangers living in the same house. Is that supposed to hurt my feelings? I'm just saying maybe it's time to let go. File for divorce, split your assets, move on with your life. Like Emily moved on with hers? Emily's passing wasn't Jenna's fault. Wasn't it? We drove in silence for another few miles. I could see Dean working through scenarios, trying to find an angle that would save his life. But I'd been planning this confrontation for too long, had considered too many variables. What about Detective Farley? Dean asked. He's already suspicious. When we both disappear, you're not both disappearing, just you. What about Jenna? Jenna gets to live with what she's done. Every day for the rest of her life. That's worse than eliminating her. Much worse. I pulled off Route 26 onto a dirt logging road that disappeared into the trees. Half a mile in, I stopped at a small clearing where I'd left the modified Charger earlier that day. Get out, I told Dean. The clearing was perhaps 50 yards across, surrounded by pine trees that blocked most of the moonlight. The Charger sat in the center like a black monument to my months of preparation. "Nice car," Dean said, trying to keep his voice casual. "It belonged to a pill dealer in Albany, impounded by police, sold at auction, eventually scrapped. No registration, no insurance, no way to trace it back to anyone." I walked Dean to the passenger side of the Charger and opened the door. "Get in." "Where are we going?" "Nowhere." This is where it ends. Dean climbed reluctantly into the passenger seat. I got behind the wheel and started the engine. Immediately, I heard the soft click of the door locks engaging. "What was that?" Dean asked. "Insurance." "The doors won't open again until the engine stops running." Dean tried his door handle, then mine. "Nothing. We were sealed inside the Charger with no way out except through the windshield." "This is your big plan? Lock us both in a car and die together?" "Not both of us." I showed him the small device in my left hand. "Remote ignition for the fuel system. When I press this button, the car fills with gasoline vapor and ignites. Takes about 30 seconds. You'll die too." "No, I won't." I pressed a second button and my driver's seat began moving backward on a motorized track I'd installed weeks earlier. It carried me through a hole I'd cut in the rear wall, depositing me in what had been the trunk space. Dean spun around, watching me disappear behind him. "What the hell?" "Escape hatch." "I'll be out of the car and 50 yards away before the fireworks start." "This is homicide. This is justice." I opened the trunk from inside and stepped out into the clearing. Dean was trapped in the front seat, the modified doors and windows holding him like a steel cage. "Greg, please. We can work this out." "No, we can't." I walked to the edge of the clearing and turned back to face the Charger. Dean's face was visible through the windshield, pale and desperate in the dashboard light. "Any last words?" I called out. "F you." "Close enough." I pressed the button. The Charger erupted in flames so suddenly and completely that I felt the heat wash over me from 50 yards away. The explosion echoed through the forest, followed by the roar of burning gasoline and the screams of Dean Russo as he died. I watched until the screaming stopped, then walked back to my truck and drove home. Jenna was waiting in the kitchen when I got home, her face tight with worry and something that might have been guilt. "Where have you been?" she asked. "I've been calling you for hours." "Working late, end-of-month paperwork." "Dean's not answering his phone." "Maybe he's busy." She studied my face, looking for signs of whatever she suspected I might have done. "There was an explosion at Safe Track." "I heard it on the police scanner." "What kind of explosion?" "Car fire in the parking lot. They're saying it might have been arson." I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. "That's unfortunate." "Greg, where's Dean?" "How would I know where Dean is?" "Because you've been watching us, following us. I know you have." "Have I?" "Stop playing games." "I know you know about us, and I know you're angry." I looked at my wife of 17 years, the woman who'd chosen her lover over our dying daughter, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done caring about what you do or who you do it with." Jenna sat down across from me, her hands shaking. "Dean thinks you're dangerous. Dean thinks a lot of things, most of them wrong. He's scared, Greg. Really scared." "He should be." The words hung between us like a confession. Jenna's face went pale. "What did you do?" "I solved a problem." "What kind of problem?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder, set it on the table between us, and pressed play. Dean's voice filled the kitchen. "An accident. Something that looks natural." Then Jenna's voice. "You want to eliminate my husband?" Then Dean again. "I want to eliminate a threat." I let the recording play for several minutes, watching Jenna's face crumble as she heard her own voice plotting my homicide. When it finished, I turned off the recorder. "Interesting conversation," I said. "Greg, I can explain." "No need. It's all very clear. We weren't serious. We were just talking, fantasizing about ending me, about being free, about being together without complications. And the best way to accomplish that was to stage my end in a car accident." Jenna was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "It was Dean's idea. I never would have gone through with it." "I think you would have. No, I loved you once. I could never." You loved our daughter once too. But that didn't stop you from choosing Dean over her when she needed you most. That's not fair. Fair. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness where Route 26 wound through the forest. Emily begging for help while you ignored her calls? That's fair? I didn't know she was in trouble. You didn't care. You were too busy with your boyfriend to be bothered by your own daughter. Jenna was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with grief and fear. What do you want from me? Nothing. There's nothing left I want from you. Then what happens now? I turned back to face her. Now you live with what you've done every day. For the rest of your life. What about Dean? Dean won't be a problem anymore. What does that mean? It means you're on your own now, Jenna. No husband, no lover, no daughter. Just you and your choices. I walked toward the stairs, leaving her crying at the kitchen table. Greg, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling or... Good night, Jenna. I went upstairs and packed a single bag with clothes and personal items. Everything else could stay. The house, the furniture, the memories. They all belonged to a life that was ending tonight. When I came back downstairs, Jenna was standing by the front door. Where are you going? Away. For how long? Forever. You can't just leave. What about the police? What about Detective Farley? What about them? When Dean turns up missing, Dean had a lot of enemies, someone who'd been maltreating him for months. Could have been anyone. Jenna's face went through several expressions: confusion, realization, and finally horror. You eliminated him. I solved a problem. Oh God. Oh God, you actually eliminated him. Did you think I was going to let you homicide me? Did you think I was that stupid? I walked past her toward the door. She grabbed my arm. Greg, please, don't do this. Don't leave me. You left me months ago. I'm just making it official. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about everything. About Emily, about Dean, about all of it. I looked at her one last time. This woman who'd shared my bed and my life and my daughter. She looked older now, beaten down by guilt and fear and the weight of her choices. Sorry doesn't bring Emily back, I said. I walked out the front door and got in my truck. Jenna followed me to the driveway, still pleading, still trying to find some way to undo what couldn't be undone. Where will you go? She called out as I started the engine. Somewhere Emily would have approved of. I backed out of the driveway and drove away, leaving Jenna standing in the darkness of our empty house. 3 days later, Detective Farley found me at a diner 2 towns over, eating breakfast and reading the newspaper like I didn't have a care in the world. Mind if I sit down? He asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Free country. Dean Russo's missing. Is he? Last seen Tuesday night. His car was found burned out in the Safe Track parking lot. I turned a page of the newspaper. That's unfortunate. Your wife seems to think you might know something about it. My wife thinks a lot of things, most of them wrong. Farley studied my face with the patience of a man who'd spent 25 years reading guilty suspects. She told me about the affair. Did she? Says Dean was scared of you, thought you might hurt him. Did Dean strike you as the type to scare easily? Not particularly. But then again, you don't strike me as the type to commit homicide. I folded the newspaper and met his gaze. What type is that? Usually younger, usually stupider. Usually leaves more evidence. Sounds like you don't have much evidence. I have a missing person, a burned car, and a wife who thinks her husband eliminated her lover. Sounds like a domestic dispute. Farley leaned back in his seat. Here's what I think happened. I think you found out about the affair and decided to do something about it. I think you've been maltreating Dean for months, building up to something bigger. That's an interesting theory. I also think you're too smart to leave evidence lying around. Too careful to make obvious mistakes. If you say so. Which means I probably can't prove anything. At least not with what I have now. I signaled the waitress for more coffee. Sounds like you have a problem. No, you have a problem. Because even if I can't prove you eliminated Dean Russo, I know you did it. And I'll be watching you for the rest of your life, waiting for you to slip up. That sounds exhausting for both of us. Farley stood up and dropped a business card on the table. Call me when you're ready to confess. After he left, I finished my breakfast and drove to the cemetery where Emily was buried. Her grave was still covered with flowers from friends and teachers, small tokens of remembrance from people who'd loved her. I sat on the grass beside her headstone and told her what I'd done. "I know it doesn't bring you back," I said to the carved marble. "But maybe now you can rest easy, knowing that the people who failed you face consequences." The wind moved through the trees around the cemetery, carrying the sound of distant traffic and children playing in a nearby park. Life going on, indifferent to grief and justice and revenge. I stayed until sunset, then drove to the bus station and bought a ticket to somewhere Emily had always wanted to visit. Colorado, where she'd planned to go to college and study art. The bus pulled out at 11:30 p.m., carrying me away from everything I'd ever known. In the rearview mirror through the back window, I watched the lights of town disappear into darkness. On the seat beside me was a newspaper with the headline, "Local Man Missing After Car Fire." Below it was Dean's photograph, smiling and confident in the way that young men smiled when they thought the world owed them everything. I closed my eyes and saw Emily's face instead. Not as she'd looked in the morgue, but as she'd looked on her last birthday, blowing out candles and making wishes that would never come true. The bus rolled through the night toward Colorado, and I never looked back again. At 3:17 a.m., we stopped for fuel at a truck stop outside Denver. I bought coffee and a local newspaper, scanning the headlines for any mention of Dean Russo or the investigation. Nothing. Just local politics and sports scores and weather forecasts that mattered to people who still had futures to worry about. I walked outside and stood in the parking lot, looking up at stars that Emily would never see. The night air was thin and cold, carrying the promise of mountains and snow and places where a man could disappear completely. In my pocket was Emily's bracelet, the one they'd found crushed under the seat of Jenna's car. I'd taken it from the evidence locker at the police station, one last piece of my daughter to carry with me into whatever came next. The bus driver called for passengers to reboard. I climbed the steps and found my seat, settling in for the final leg of the journey to Denver. As we pulled back onto the highway, I thought about Jenna waking up alone in our empty house, wondering if I was ever coming back, wondering if the police would find enough evidence to arrest her as an accessory to homicide conspiracy, wondering if she'd ever be able to forget the sound of Dean's voice planning my passing, or the look on my face when I played the recording back to her. She'd live with those memories forever, just as I'd planned. Some punishments were worse than end. The bus rolled through the darkness toward Denver, carrying me toward whatever justice looked like for a man who'd lost everything that mattered and found it again in revenge. I closed my eyes and dreamed of Emily, young and alive and proud of her father for finally doing the right thing.